Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our next webinar in this series of webinars that MMA Mobile Marketing Association has worked on to enable and provide a lot of learning, evangelism, and education during these times. We believe that there is an opportunity for all of us to learn while we have maybe a little extra time on our hands at home. This entire webinar series has been planned keeping in mind three objectives. Number one, take a lot of learnings of what is happening around COVID, how marketers, publishers, and technology providers are dealing with it, and what are some of the great insights that come out of it. Second, we believe it is a great time to evangelize some of the best practices and use cases around advertising and marketing on mobile, but also specifically with regard to dealing with the times that we are going through. And last but not the least is an opportunity to learn from each other. So this is where the learning element comes into play. The webinar that we have today is titled Navigating the Shift in Consumer Behavior in Asia during COVID-19. We have some great insights from China. We truly believe China has conquered COVID in a lot of ways. And we have a representative from our partner organization and a member organization InMobi, Jessie, who is actually going to help answer some of the queries that you may have on China and what that country went through and what they did to overcome that. And that to me is a big learning. And I think the world is looking towards China. China could be the guiding light of how to deal with it. There are very good stories that come out of China. One of them was about the increase in cost of media. May not be good for some, but for others it is. But also the resurgence of everything that we would want in a normal world. So that's the focus of the webinar. That's why we are doing this. We hope you are enjoying all the webinars that we are putting together for you guys. And we have a series of a lot of more webinars that will be planned, and I will share some of those details with you. So just before we move on with the subject today, I wanted to give you a quick introduction on MMA, Mobile Marketing Association. Our purpose is to actually work with the people in the marketing industry. Our prime audience is marketers. These are the people who we believe are at the front end of promotion and advertising when it comes to marketing. Secondly, our strategic priorities are focused around some of the fundamentals of advertising and marketing, measurement and business impact. Measurement is a key challenge, and it is something that everybody is struggling with. And I think as we move forward, MMA, our focus is to help shape the future to build what we believe is going to be important from a measurement perspective, because mobile as a medium gets engaged with every other medium. Attribution is going to be a great outcome of that. We also work on organization development plans, trying to figure out how this future will change some of the marketing and advertising organizations and how we should be prepared for that. Our work around inspiration talks about some of the best practices, use cases. We also have a brand called Smarties, which is the worldwide global leading brand on mobile awards and recognition. And a lot of the white papers that we do around it cases. We leave the industry to learn more and more. And looking at some of the use cases can inspire the work that needs to be done. Last but not the least, we also do advocacy like any other not-for-profit organization, setting standards, guidelines, best practices, etc. And our purpose really is to help drive innovation. So that's a quick overview on MMA. We believe we will continue to strive as mobile becomes an important, very important tool in the marketing mix. Just to make sure that this webinar is highly engaging for all of you, there is in your respective control panels, there is a section on questions. You can actually use that section to ask your questions. We will take those questions and put it forward to the speakers. We also have this webinar divided into 3 parts. The first part is the presentation, second is more of a discussion, and third is again presentation. So with that, let me introduce you to our 2 speakers. Vasuta Agarwal, who manages InMobi for Asia Pacific, and Jessie Yang, who manages InMobi and is the Senior Vice President for Greater China. Jessie is going to be answering some of the pertinent questions that we all may have on what is happening and what is being learned out of China. And I am your moderator host, Rohit Dadwal. I look after the business for Mobile Marketing Association in Asia Pacific. So please do send your questions. We also have polls. When you are sending your questions, please do state your name, your company name, and your designation so that we can actually use that to ask the relevant question to the speakers. So with that, first, I'd like to hand it over to Vasuta to take us through her part of the presentation, and then we will ask Jessie to help her with answering some of the questions. So over to you, Vasuta.
Thanks, Rohit. Hi, everyone. We'll dive straight into the agenda for today. As Rohit mentioned, we'll divide this into 3 parts. We'll start off with some consumer behavior and related insights for 5 markets across Asia Pacific, which is Korea, Australia, Singapore, Indonesia, and India. We'll then dive into a quick Q&A session with Jessie around China's path to recovery and some of the best practices emerging from there. And then go back into the last section, which is how do you market responsibly as a brand in the current scenario. So, as all of you are aware that the current COVID-19 situation is a worldwide impact across more than 180 countries. And as the pandemic started around February, we've seen a huge change in customer behavior. And of course, as you see, as the number of cases across countries in Asia has risen, as has the death toll, the way consumers are feeling, behaving, and how their outlook towards things is changing becomes a critical aspect and input into even the brand and marketing community. And that's what we'll try to do today, is how do we make some of these insights relevant for all of us. So just before we dive into specific market insights, giving you a quick sense of how this data was collected and how these insights were derived, is this data covers about 200 million unique users across the InMobi platform, covering data around location, around app ownership, around offline and online behavior of consumers. And we've complemented this data with data collected from InMobi Pulse, which is a mobile survey product where we do continuous polls and surveys of consumers to get their ongoing sentiments, insights from them on an ongoing basis. And we've brought these 2 sort of data sets together to share with you some of the insights in the next set of slides. So we'll start with some insights for Korea. In South Korea, if you see, this is 2 charts here which talk about a couple of places of interest or points of interest around hospitals and restaurants, and what is some of the behavior that we saw emerging around visitors and footfalls in these places of interest. So if you see, the orange graphs show the daily visitors, and the blue graphs are what indicate the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the country. As you see, as the situation evolved through March and April, especially in the last 3 weeks in April, as Korea witnessed new patients coming in, new import cases shooting up, the footfalls of the visit patterns to the hospitals has increased by more than 170%. Consequently, on the other side, if you see when it comes to other places of dining out and restaurants and so on, that has seen a converse behavior as the number of cases has continued to go up. And of course, it's now dropped to less than 50% of even the baseline that we saw earlier. Similarly, looking at patterns at transport hubs like bus and train stations, we've seen, especially now in the last 2 weeks, as some of the the curve had started to flatten in Korea, people have started going back a little bit to their normal lifestyle in terms of footfall seen at transport hubs. Activities around elections and examinations have resumed as Korea saw some form of recovery. And that's indicated here also, as you see in the charts, where the orange graph has started to pick up in the last 2 weeks in Korea around the transport hubs. Switching gears, to the online behavior, right? What kind of content, what kind of apps are people consuming in Korea? And you see here a huge growth in the educational gaming apps, right? I think Korea has always been known to be a very large e-gaming market, but we've seen that sort of go through the roof, especially in the last 2 months during the current pandemic situation. So if you see here, gaming, whether it's card games, adventure games, board games, everything has seen a huge surge with an exceptionally high consumption on the educational gaming side as that category starts to pick up. Similarly, on the non-gaming genre of apps, you see that people are flocking a lot to news apps, possibly to get information around the current situation and how it's evolving. And same for health apps, because as people become more and more concerned about health and hygiene, there is a huge surge happening there as well. Also, Korea's always been sort of an e-commerce online shopping first market. So the shopping apps have only seen about a 30% growth or so, but that's still significant given that it's already a very high penetration e-commerce market in Asia. Let's move, down under to Australia and what is the behavior that we saw of consumers across Australia. So if you see in Australia, we looked at a few, locations like supermarkets, like gyms. And in Australia, actually, towards end of March, when, there was a certain increase in cases and, the death toll, that's when the supermarket visits started seeing a drop. And you see here almost a 35% drop in the supermarket visits in the last 3 weeks since end March. Similarly, when it comes to fitness centers and gyms, after there was a closure ordered, of all of these places, is when you've started to see a drop again of around 36% even since March. So all of these places, even in Australia, are seeing a decline when it comes to visits. On the app side, however, if you see content, interestingly, the educational gaming apps continue to have a predominance even in Australia, similar to Korea. So clearly, people are spending a lot of time when it comes to e-learning and online learning. In terms of staying connected, right, you see dating apps have seen a huge growth. So dating apps and social apps are seeing, a surge as well. And this is possibly a way that people in Australia are trying to stay connected during the lockdown. And similar to Korea, again, you see that news apps tend to see a surge because that's one of the dominant places that people are looking for information. Let's move back into Southeast Asia, specifically looking at Singapore. In Singapore, we looked at a couple of places, not just supermarkets, but also, parks and tourist attractions. Singapore had a circuit breaker announcement, which happened earlier in April, as the cases, sort of rose in Singapore. And here, again, you see that, in the initial days, there was actually an increase in supermarket visits because there was, sort of a notion of more panic buying and possibly, hoarding of groceries and other essential items that happened for a while in March. However, after the circuit breaker, you see that it was a decline which happened in the visits in Singapore. That as the cases rose, that happened. Of course, parks and tourist attractions, as some of those were shut down, there has been a drop, especially in the start to mid of April, because obviously people are now more concerned about being outdoors. When we look at the app content in Singapore, especially I thought what was interesting is if you see the communication apps, right? I mean, it's just unprecedented growth, and this clearly shows that people are trying to really, stay in touch with family, with friends, with colleagues, and are using communication apps very, very effectively to do so. Of course, there's also, in terms of entertainment, music, where people are spending time. And similar to, maybe not similar, but trivia gaming apps is an area where, Singapore, is spending a lot of time when it comes to gaming consumption. So slightly different from, the insights that we saw in Korea and Australia, where a lot of time was spending on educational gaming apps, but definitely the communication apps bit is out of the charts when it comes to Singapore. So we'll pause here and get a quick sense from the audience of what app categories you have been spending the most time on in the last couple of weeks. You should see a poll pop up on your screens very soon. So I'd request you all to sort of vote with your answers, and we should have the results shortly with us.
We will keep the poll open for another 30 seconds. And just there are a few questions that are coming our way. The first answer, which everybody is asking, will the presentation be available? Yes. The copy of the presentation in a PDF format will be available for all of you to download post the webinar. It will be sent with a survey form later on. Secondly, the question that people are asking is, will it be possible to actually have some handouts? Handouts are not particularly designed for this webinar, but the PDF version of this presentation would be available. I hope that helps answers a lot of the queries that are coming. So with that, I'm now going to close the poll and share the results. And Vasuta, then you can take it forward. The results are on your screen. Thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. So I'll quickly read it out. So I think disproportionately high, I think people have said almost 40% people have been spending time on social media apps, and another 33% on OTT video and streaming apps. So definitely, top of the charts is social media and OTT video streaming apps from the audience. Another big area is news apps, which we also saw, across the various market insights that we saw that people are. So even in the audience, that's resonating well, as I can see. So thank you for, sharing your views on this one. So clearly, social media, OTT video streaming, and news apps are, the big categories of apps where people are spending the most time on. With that, we'll switch gears a little bit and we'll talk about Indonesia and India. So for Indonesia and India, what we did is that we actually conducted some consumer surveys. So you'll see different insights in the next two sections. So for Indonesia, we had done a survey of about 1,100 participants using mobile surveys, and this was collected in the last week of March. So you see here, the questions were basically to get a sense of the level of awareness, understanding, and the outlook of Indonesian consumers and how they are thinking about the current pandemic. So if you see, 85% of the people were unsure of even what was the source of the outbreak. And they were not able to even identify preventive measures. So clearly, there were some challenges when it came to awareness and understanding. And possibly even indicated by almost 34% people not taking any precautions on the social distancing side. So this gave a sense of how possibly a dipstick of how Indonesia was seeing the pandemic situation towards the end of March. Some of the things people also shared was around the challenges that they were facing, especially when it came to buying essentials, how their lifestyles were impacted. So if you see, almost 40% people were finding scarcity of things like sanitizers and hand wash, because obviously there was a huge need for those at that time. And 37% people actually said that they had changed their behavior in terms of ordering in or eating out. So clearly, the sort of the impact of the pandemic had started to show on the daily lives of people. We also sort of did a dipstick to understand how people's shopping preferences and spends were changing. And you'll see here that almost 80% people were choosing quality over price when it came to their shopping needs, which shows that people are concerned about what they are buying in the current situation, because they obviously want to make sure that their health, fitness, and hygiene regimes are maintained. And an interesting data point is also that as high as almost 74% people are actually going to increase or decrease their spend, which means that we will see some fluctuations in spending patterns as we go through the course of this pandemic. So with that, we'll switch to India. In India, we did two surveys. One was done towards the end of March, and then around mid-April. The survey spanned about 3,000 participants, across the country. And here we tried to gauge people's sentiment about how they were feeling when the lockdown started in India around end of March, and how their behavior has shaped up over the course of the last month. So 72% people, and that's very high, believe that they had been exposed to misinformation on the pandemic, and that's definitely concerning and brings to surface the challenges that people are facing around fake news and what to believe, what not to believe. People obviously, almost 84% people believe that social distancing was absolutely critical to deal with the current situation. And almost 75% were actually appreciating the lockdown measures that were put in place in the country to handle the situation. I think people's sentiments also around the economy, around losses to the business have started surfacing. And you see here that almost 56% people were expecting losses to their industry or business. And almost similar percentage were also very concerned about what would be happening to people like the daily wage earners in the country, which is the last part of the population. So all of these sentiments have started emerging. What you see here is a timeline view in this slide on how the consumer sentiment has evolved on a week-by-week basis. So the blue charts are, wave one, where the first survey was done between March 19th and 22nd, and yellow is wave two, which was done in April. And you see that almost on every dimension, the consumer sentiment has changed, right? Which also speaks volumes for how important it is for us on a week-by-week basis to keep a pulse on how consumer behavior is changing. You'll see here that people's sentiments around recovery, around following social distancing norms, change in shopping behavior. Almost everything has seen a change in the last couple of weeks, with people now spending more on things like food, on Wi-Fi, on data usage, and so on. So the survey clearly indicated a change in or a shift happening week on week when it comes to consumer sentiment. Another interesting, cut of the data in this survey was an analysis done, of course, of the app consumption of users, but across generations, right? So we try to segment users into Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X, and then look at their app consumption behavior across the three generations. So you see here on the left, right, where both Gen Z and millennials tend to be, consuming almost 41% or 46% are actually consuming news when it comes to their app consumption behavior in the current scenario, and as high as almost 25 to 30% are on social media. Whereas in the Gen X, actually still about 39 to 40% are actually consuming TV, and possibly, that's news for them. Though of course you see almost 16% are also now on OTT apps and so on. So there is of course a difference in consumption when it comes to media and app consumption behaviors across generations. You see here that gaming tends to be very popular with Gen Z when it comes to even Indian consumers. So definite sort of shift in patterns here. With that, we're at the end of our first section, which covered insights from various markets. And here we'll now dive into, China. I'll bring on board, Jessie. Jessie heads our overall Greater China business for InMobi. She's based in Beijing, and we will have a quick fireside chat with Jessie to understand how China is recovering from the current COVID-19 situation. Jessie, are you online?
I am. And hi, Vasuta, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jessie.
Yeah. Great. So thanks, Vasuta. Thanks, Rohit. Nice to be here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jessie. Before we get
Sure.
to the questions on China, there are a couple of very small questions, Vasuta. I think we could address them. One of the question is from Ed from Track World Sports, saying, what is the sample size of these surveys in each of these countries? Because you started by saying 200,000 people, right? And what is per country sample size?
Sure. So Rohit, I think the first set of insights, which covered Korea, Australia, and Singapore, that data is based on a couple of million users in each country. So we cover about 10 to 12 million users in, for example, Australia, Singapore. This would be about 3 million data points. For the surveys that I showed for India and Indonesia, so the Indonesia survey was around 1,100 people, and the India survey was about 3,200 people. So those were for the surveys.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Over to you, Jessie.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Vasuta. Great to be here. Hi, everyone. And as you may know, the China market actually is ahead of the curve, and we had the lockdown for almost 2 months, from the end of January to the end of March. So starting April, actually, the country is back to normal, and all of us are back to work in the office. Also, schools start to open as well. So what we've been seeing actually after the pandemic, in China, we've seen also the change of the consumer behaviors, during the past several months. Especially after 2 or 3 months of coronavirus situation in China, the several trends we've seen in consumer behavior. One is we've seen, consumers shift more activities to online from offline. This is very significant, especially during the past 2 or 3 months. First of all, people buy more online instead of offline. Besides the typical shopping people do online, for example, like buying clothes, buying shoes, now people spend more money in terms of buying grocery, buying foods online as well. So people spend more online, more commodities. Also, we find out, even people start to buy more drugs, online through electronic prescription. And normally, when people buy drugs, they tend to go to pharmaceutical before, but nowadays, it's become so common right now. People just try to avoid touch points offline. They just try to shift everything online. So this is one thing we find out. People buy more online. The second thing here is what we find out is there are more and more activities going online, instead of offline. First of all, you can see, there are so many online education courses going on right now in the country. Not only for typical courses, for schools, and also there are a lot of after-school training, after-school activities. People try to do everything online. So online education, becomes so popular, even much more popular now in China. And as more and more people that are used to work from home, so people are, before, in China, people tend to work, in the office, and they're not very used to do a video conference call. But nowadays, more and more people are very used to do video conference call. They tend to use more like Teams, Zoom, or some local apps in China, try to work from home. And interesting thing here is we also find out people tend to buy more IT products. For example, computers or monitors, and so that they can, they can get enough equipment at home so that they can they can work from home as well. So this is the second thing, more activities online. What we also find out actually, in terms of before, people normally go to hospitals, they consult doctors for any health related issue. Nowadays, because people try to avoid go to hospitals, because of the pandemic situation, they tend to go online. They tend to seek for more online, health-related suggestions, advice from doctors or from their patient, from their physicians as well. So there are more activities before normally happen online. Now offline, they now shift to online. What we also think see interesting things, for example, in the real estate market, and people normally go to see the apartments, see the houses. They want to see the houses by themselves. They want to go there to check the houses out before they buy. But right now, because it's really hard, to go on site, so people tend to go to the website or go to certain app. They try to leverage some, VR, video or VR technology to see the houses by themselves. So, in summary, one activity we find out is more activities online. People buy more things online, do more things, normally happen offline, online as well. So this is one consumer trend we've seen right now. The second one, what we've seen right now is besides people buy more online, we also see there are more and more people tend to do activities online as well. And Vasuta just shared the report with you about Z generation, Generation X or millennium. In China before, maybe Generation Z or millennial generation, they tend to buy more online. And however, Generation X or the older generation, they tend to buy less. But because of the pandemic situation, actually, even the older generation, they start to get used to buying everything online, groceries, typical goods. So the user base of online actually is getting larger and larger these days. So those are the typical consumer behavior, online behavior we've seen right now. So there's a shifting of offline activities to online. So let's go to the second question. Different verticals may have been affected actually differently during the crisis. And which verticals do you think have the most potential to make a comeback? In terms of the verticals that are affected the most, what we've seen actually during the past 3 months is, first of all, travel sector actually get hit quite a lot. The airlines, hotels, or even the online booking companies, actually they get affected significantly. The business, reduced to close to zero. So all the travel sectors impacted quite a lot, significantly. Also, we find out sectors like entertainment sectors, the movie, sector, parks, theme parks, also affected quite significantly as well. And even the like automobile industry, real estate industry, they're all impacted significantly during the past 3 months. However, we also see some, sectors they thrive during the past 3, months because of the, situation. As I mentioned earlier, actually, the IT, IT industry actually, we've seen, there are more and more people actually that buy IT-related products, monitors, computers, consumer electronics, because things can be buy online. And then we've seen, there's increase of sales actually for some of the IT products in the market. And in fact, there's some of the brands actually, they increased the budget, during the pandemic, crisis situation, months during the past 3 months. The second sector we've seen, it's health-related sectors. Actually, they're more aggressive in terms of selling the products, engaging the customers. For example, health-related wearable devices, because they want to sell more wearable devices, health-related stuff. They tend to promote more of the products in the market. Pharmacies, pharmaceutical companies, actually, they're much more active during the crisis situation, and then they can sell more during those kind of crisis time. So definitely what we're seeing is that although most of the sectors actually they impacted during the past 3 months, however, what we're seeing is IT, health-related industry actually is still seems quite good. And which verticals do you think we believe have the most potential to make comeback? And what we're seeing, based on the trends in the market, situation in the market, will change behavior in the market. What we find out is what we believe, first of all, the industries, or the companies that can shift more activities from offline to online, actually they can recover better. Before, we know there's some of the brands, they used to open up a lot of offline shops. And then, however, during the past 2 or 3 months, actually, the sales actually is really limited. However, what we find out for some of the brands, actually, they start to be more aggressive in terms of open up the online shops so that, they can shift the online, offline shopping, offline activities immediately to online. So that's why, they can recover much better. And also what we find out, also there's some brands, before in China, a lot of brands, they sell the products with the e-commerce platform like Alibaba or JD.com. And during the pandemics, even after the pandemics, what they believe is they need to beef up their own official site, whether mobile site or website. They need to beef up the official website more so that they can sell goods on their own website, and then they can really transfer more, offline activities to online activities. So our suggestion here is that, we, as a company or as an industry, we need to adapt to the situation, to the change of the behavior, consumer behavior in the market, so that we can try to recover from the impacts of the pandemics, so that we can do much better compared to our competitors in the market. Yeah, so this is the second question. Let's go to the third questions. So what are the best examples, you guys might ask, we've seen, in China. What we've seen, definitely there are some very good examples in the China market right now. Actually, people can benefit. And one thing I really want to emphasize here is live streaming e-commerce. And as you guys may know, while most live streaming platform actually in the West are mainly focused on gaming and entertainment. However, in China, actually, live streaming e-commerce actually is become more and more popular. Live streaming is become a go-to option for Chinese consumers who are seeking for new products and new services. And during the past 2 or 3 months, we've seen brands actually, they emphasize a lot more on live streaming commerce. And either they are engaged with live streaming apps, so they sell, products on this live streaming apps, and then engage with customers and people that can buy more. They either engaged with sell in China right now. Actually, the 3 largest live streaming platform in China. One is Alibaba's Taobao Live, and then it holds the largest share of live streaming e-commerce in China. The second one is TikTok. So the Chinese version is Douyin, and the third one is Kuai. And those 3 platforms actually accounts for majority of the live streaming sales in the China market. So during the past 3 months, we've seen some very, good companies actually, they invest more on live streaming e-commerce, by partner with those 3 top live streaming platforms in the market. They are able to engage with the customer more, and then so that they can have more sales. So this is a very typical examples we would like to share. And another thing here is one of some of the brands in the market, as I said earlier, they try to beef up their own online sales on their own website, especially the international brands. They have a very good brand name. They can really attract the users to their own website. And then on their own website, comparing to typical commerce platform, actually they can offer more SKU, more products, so that they're able to engage the users more, and then they can buy more in the market. So this is pretty much what we've seen in the China market. And as the economy continue to evolve, actually we've seen more and more activities in the market as well after the economy come back. And Labor Day, actually, Labor Day holiday starts during this weekend. And what we've seen right now is that there's a huge bounce back, in the industry, because everybody want to sell in the market, and they want to recover. And the government tried to encourage domestic consumption more. So from May 1st to May 5th, actually, this is a holiday in China. So we consider this is more like a starting point of the China economy recovery. And hopefully we can see more sales by the brands during this China holiday time. And then so that the economy can continue to recover going forward. So that's all from my side, Vasuta and Rohit. Yeah.
Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you, Jessie. There are a couple of questions which I thought you asked because they are very relevant to the session that you were doing and you were talking about it, path to recovery. So the question that I have right now is with regard to the opportunity of China's path to recovery. Does that mean that there is no hesitation on behalf of China to say that they will not have another problem with regard to COVID going forward, and will that impact the business?
Yeah, so I think in China right now, the situation is under control, but without vaccine, actually, it's really hard to say. We don't have any, we'll get away with the issues anymore. We still have the risks, in the country, and there's a potential, things might come back. So that's why things are still quite strict here. And if you go to a certain buildings, you have the people at the gate, they'll measure your temperature, and if your temperature is more than 37.2, you won't be allowed to get into the buildings to work. So I think people are still very cautious in terms of going out, and so definitely I think it cannot be come back to business as usual before 100%, but definitely it's coming back to 80% or 90%. On the other hand, for a lot of companies, because they didn't do much activities during the past 4 months, from January to March, at least 3 or 4 months. So nowadays, they want to make sure business get back to normal, and then they want to invest more in on the products, so that they can sell more, try to recover for the rest of the month, for the rest of the year. Yeah.
We have one more question from Lizda. Lizda says, this question is specifically for you, Jessie, again. Is there any economic recession in China during and after the pandemic? And many people still buying items related to IT and electronics. I think you've answered the second part. The first part of economic recession, does that still exist? And do they use online loan, credit card, or cash? What is the prevalent methodology of payment?
Okay, yeah, great question. So basically, before the pandemics in China, the GDP growth in 2019 is about 6%. And during the pandemics, Q1 this year, the GDP growth actually is -6. And then it's forecasted the GDP growth in Q2 is going to be about 2 to 3%. And the rest of the year, is going to be about 5 to 6%. So this is the forecast by, a lot of companies in China. So basically, based on the GDP growth, actually, definitely there was a recession in Q1, and because the growth rate is negative comparing to average 6% before. And then Q2 actually, because things start to recover, and then the growth rate is going to be about 2 to 3%. So it's going to be still the recession. And but for Q3 and Q4, people are very bullish. So Based on the GDP estimation, things will be back to normal in Q3 and Q4. And next year, people are even more bullish. A lot of institutions actually they forecast that the GDP will be bounced back to more than 9%. So people are very optimistic about the future, although we have like 2-quarter recession from Q1 and then from Q2. So this is the first part of the question. Yeah. The second question, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The second question actually is about payment. Actually, in China, most of the payment actually in China is WeChat payment and also is Alipay. So mainly is the mobile payment. So right now here in China, we don't have to carry cash with us. Well, we normally a small group of people use credit card. Although credit card is still a very common ways to make the payment, but WeChat Pay, Alipay actually is the most common payment ways we use in China now.
Perfect. Sounds good. So we do have a lot more other questions, but I think Vasuta has a few more slides to finish. And why don't we do that, and then we can come back to the questions, quick fire round questions towards the end. Back to you, Vasuta.
Thanks, Rohit. So I think, guys, this brings us, very aptly to the last section of the webinar, which is, as Jessie talked about, China bouncing back and on a path to recovery. For all of us, how do we navigate this new reality as, the pandemic slows down in countries? And that's what we'll talk about in this section. Before we dive in, a quick, question for all of you here, for the audience. How do you think brands should react to this new reality? I think the poll question should be on your screen shortly.
We'll take about 30-40 seconds more to answer this question. We do have 30% people who have already responded. So please do have your say. Please press one of the buttons or more of these. While we're doing that, Vasuta, I have a very quick question, maybe a yes or no, and a very short answer for this. The question is actually about the population demographic in India. And this is from Dinesh Rana. COVID kills the old people. So will India lose demographic advantage as after the epidemic, the average age of Italy, US, Spain, etc. Spain and Japan will come down? Do you have a point of view on this? Is this yes, no kind of a question, or how do we address this?
So I think this is possibly hard to say, Rohit, because I think all of that sort of, depends on, I think, the mortality, etc. that we're saying. So I don't think I'm really an expert on, how the demographics would change. I would imagine, however, that India, given the large, population that we have, and probably, the death toll has been on the lower side right now for India. I don't think this will make a significant or material impact on the demographic side. But yeah, it's hard to say.
Okay, thank you. You have the results in front of you, Vasuta.
Sure. So I think, guys, the question was how should brands react to this new reality? And I think an overwhelming, 74% people said that brands should focus on purpose-led communication. I think interesting to see that 0% said that, brands should not market or advertise at all. And this very, sort of resonates also going into our next section, where we'll talk about a little bit about, what are some brands doing when it comes to focusing on their communication, messaging, and how they're thinking about it. So, the short poll that we conducted actually resonates very well with a larger sort of study which was done in March by Kantar, which covered 25,000 consumers across 30 countries. And you'll see here that similar to what the audience here said, only 8% of consumers, even in that study, said that, brands should stop advertising, which means that, an overwhelming 92% people, even in the study, and 100% people in this audience believe that brands should continue to, advertise and reach out to their audiences. However, the nature of that communication and reach out needs to possibly, be tweaked or changed. Because if you see, 3 in 4 consumers in the study done earlier believed that, brands should be informing people of what they are doing in the current situation. They should also tweak their messaging to inform, their customers how they are helping their customers in their daily lives. And they should not exploit the current situation, right? So those were some of the changes that consumers want in terms of the communication that they're receiving from their brands. And so what this leads us to is, how as a brand or a marketer, you should think about marketing and advertising in a more responsible way in the current situation. 3 key themes that emerge, and I'll share a few examples on this to make this, relevant. The first one is taking a slightly more long-term approach to your entire marketing and advertising communication, right? And not being very opportunistic about it, making sure that the communication that you have is not insensitive, doesn't get, misinterpreted in the current situation. I think all of us know, the very popular, KFC campaign, which has been around for ages, which is the whole finger licking good campaign. That actually had to be pulled back in March because, consumers felt it was not apt for the current scenario where there's a lot of focus on, health and hygiene. So KFC actually pulled that back, right? So things like this, which were, relevant earlier, but possibly need to be tweaked now, and need to be thought of in a more long-term way. Right. Similarly, building mental brand equity, right? What this means is being able to address the core concerns and issues that you think consumers will be facing, because it's a very uncertain time, right? People may not know simple things like whether your operations or services are even on or off. Is there a change in that? So making sure that you're out there with that communication front and center and making a difference in your consumers' lives on a daily basis. And the last one is around, corporate social responsibility, around public service announcements, and how do you make sure that even if you don't have a product or a service which is, let's say, fitting into the consumer's daily lives today, you're still out there talking about some of the work that you may be doing and supporting the community, because that also builds, mental brand equity with your consumers. So with that, I'll share a few examples of what some brands have done and done it quite well. You see here examples of from like Lazada, HubSpot, and some of the productivity apps like Teams and Slack, and how they have leveraged their owned and earned media to stay connected, to stay relevant with their customers. Lazada, for example, has been using their social pages to talk about video sessions which they are hosting to actually raise awareness about the COVID-19 situation. How should people deal with it? What are some of the health precautions and so on that should be taking? So they're using their social media to do that. Similarly, you see videos out from Teams, from Slack, which are productivity tools, right, which are absolutely critical for people in this scenario. We talked about it in the China session as well, that as more and more people stay at home, work from home, kids are learning from home, productivity and communication tools become extremely important. So being out there front and center, communicating with your audiences on that front becomes very, very critical. Here's another example. This is, we talked about building mental brand equity with customers. This is a food delivery, service called Zomato in India, where they actually made a change to their product and service, where they switched to contactless delivery, right? Because they wanted to assure people about the health and hygiene of their services. So this is a video that they put out again on their social media, talking through what should customers expect. And this relates to the point of making sure that your customers are aware and reassured of your operations, of your product, in these times of uncertainty. These examples here talk about corporate social responsibility or CSR initiatives that different brands have been taking. You have Miller Lite here, you have Spotify, which has launched a COVID relief fund for music artists and the creative community. Western Union, where they're donating for COVID-19 relief funds. and carousel. So all of these, they're using their digital channels to talk about what they're doing for the community at large. And this again becomes an important component of your communication to your consumers. Of course, as you all saw in the first section, there is a lot of time getting spent on mobile and mobile apps, and therefore also making sure that your communication is relevant when it comes to channel. So, thinking about mobile as a mobile, your communication in terms of a mobile first channel is more critical now than ever before. Here you see examples again of what different brands have done, like Lifebuoy, like, Victoria government in Australia and so on, to really leverage mobile as a channel and engage their consumers on that, because they know that the time being spent by customers now on mobile is more disproportionate than ever. Finally, I think to sum it all up, how do we tie this all together? We talked about, how consumer behavior is changing, and therefore, researching consumer behavior, deriving insights from it on a continuous basis becomes important, because consumer behavior is shifting now, not on a, annual basis, but literally on a week-on-week basis. Segmenting your customers, once again, we've all as brands and marketeers known that we had certain target audience segments, but rethinking are there new audience segments that I'm missing and must go after, it becomes important. And then tying that with the right brand communication and messaging to bring the whole thing together is what is the need of the hour, and what we really need to navigate the new reality in a post-COVID world. So with that, I'll pause, and I'll hand over back to Rohit and see if we have time for more questions.
Thank you, Vasuta. Thank you, Jessie. Yes, we have questions. We have a few questions. The first question is from Maria, and Maria's question is really for Jessie, I guess. What's the impact of the brands in China before and after COVID-19 outbreak, and what kind of great comeback for those brands now? Can you cite some examples of that, Jessie?
You mean the impact of, can you repeat the question again, Rohit?
Yeah, sure. We'll do 3 or 4 questions, quick 30-40-second answers, please, if possible. The question is from Maria. The question is, what impact of the brands in China before and after the COVID-19 breakout, and what kind of comeback are those brands seeing right now?
Yeah. So
which industry got the kind of comeback there?
Okay. So before the virus, actually, China was close to the China Spring Festival. So the brand activity actually is slowing down because of the Spring Festival in China. But right after the, during the pandemic situation in China from January to March, actually, all the activity actually is down. It's a brand actually doesn't spend much money anymore in terms of promotion. And however, because online buying is still going on, actually they try to shift more, but promotion actually is close to zero. After the pandemic, I think, all the brands actually, they just want to, ramp up the business here, because, they lost 3 to 4 months total. Now, especially the government is encouraging domestic consumption. They want to ramp up their activities as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Megha. She's with Lodestar in Delhi, and her question is, what is your point of view on super apps? Is it a bubble or is it here to stay? I guess either of you can take that question, Vasuta or Jessie. Super apps.
Sure. So I think, super apps, when it comes to obviously China's context, I think Jessie can share, but I think it's a whole ecosystem there, and it's definitely not a bubble. I think Jessie referred to WeChat and Alipay, which are not just, payment apps, but a full ecosystem of social communication, video streaming, everything in one ecosystem. Even in Southeast Asia, if you see, we do have, super app ecosystems in the form of, where Grab has, services not just around ride hailing, but food and, multiple such services, as does Gojek. So I think these markets at least give us a sense that it is not a bubble. And in India also now we possibly have, with the sort of Facebook and Geo deal that recently happens, I think the aspiration is to bring together, the commerce and communication and video ecosystem together. I think time will tell if, India also sees a ramp up of that ecosystem as some of the other markets in China and Southeast Asia have.
Okay. Last question and a quick response to this. This is from Mimeyo from Mitsui and Company in China. And this is for Jessie again. Do you think that telehealth or online fitness will continue its popularity even after the outbreak is controlled? If yes, why?
Yeah, so I think definitely the online activities will continue even after the pandemic. First of all, is right now the services is much better compared to before, especially after the pandemics. Actually, all the companies in China actually they're investing online, and in China actually people call it digitalization. Digitalization. Yeah, the thing here is like Jack Ma mentioned, before the pandemics, actually, internet is nice to have for a lot of brands. But nowadays, after the pandemics, internet is must to have. So I think the trend is there. Every company want to go online, go digital. This is the trend. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that. Now we have a few more questions, but we are running out of time. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their time, for engaging with us on this webinar. I hope you found this useful. As we mentioned, we will send you a copy of this PDF version of this presentation that you might actually use. In the meantime, I wanted to state to everybody that there are many ways to engage with MMA. There are a lot of programs that we are doing. They're all available on the slide in front of you. You can engage with them. And on the next slide, you will see that we have various ways to engage. So we have a newsletter, we have the LinkedIn group, we have all possible social media activities. We have case study hub and a lot of reports and benchmarks. So you can log on to mmagglobal.com and you can get access to either one of them. If you are not already a member of MMA, we highly encourage you to become part of the association, become part of the industry, where we are trying to shape the future, and we would love to have everybody accompany us while we do that. With that, thank you everybody once again. We do not want to exceed our allocated time of exact 31 minutes, 60 minutes, but we are now at 61 minutes. Quick look into the webinars, upcoming webinars that we have already planned, and there'll be more that will be getting added. So please sign up for our newsletter, and we will be in touch. With that, thank you everybody, and hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Jessie, and thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Sophie. Yeah, thank you.